of the Outpost. Uh, this has been a long time coming, and we're really excited to catch up with you all after a bit. So, as you can see, we've actually been exploring with a couple of interesting new formats over the recent past. Last time with DeepSeek, we chose something which was on everybody's mind, and all three of us jumped in on with different perspectives on something that was extremely topical and extremely relevant. Today, we're taking that experimentation a little further. We're trying a new format where one of us talks about the top three things that's caught our eye in the AI space in the recent past. And that's across the board, whether it's on research, UI, news, UX, whatever it is. But of course, as always, we love to have our multi perspective on every topic that comes across. Today, we'll be taking that version forward with Dushyant leading the way to talk about the top three things that's caught his eye in the AI space this week.
So today I'm going to talk about the whole discovery that is coming up in the field of AI scientist. Correct. In some of our previous episode, I did talk about Sakana AI, which is a small research lab based out of Japan, and how they created this wonderful AI scientist. And while it came out, I was kind of really excited about it. The paper was like super nice, and they made a lot of progress since then. But few weeks back, I learned that Google also jumped into this race of building AI scientists, correct? And they have come up with their paper or their version of AI co-scientist is what they are calling it. It's a multi-agent system that a scientist can basically interact with an AI system to talk about a particular field in their research, get very vetted answers from them, maybe also instruct them to carry autonomous experiments, maybe detail out those experiments, write papers, and also get it peer reviewed. So it's a fascinating and things. If you recall in a previous episode, I did mention that why this is such an important thing is that we have mostly seen that AI research is kind of a luxury of a large tech organization, correct? Like people need to have like really high talent, they need to have all the resources to be able to do this really cutting edge AI research out of it. But with system like this, correct, and other innovation in open source AI model development, uh, I think everybody can try and take a experiences what does it look like to be part of it. So before I jump into AI scientist and kind of know everything, I also kind of wanted to learn like why everybody is building AI scientist. Correct? It turns out that there is a competition. There's a grand challenge to kind of basically work on this kind of problem. The grand challenge was announced in 2020 by the Alan Turing Institute, where they kind of made an open call for organizations and research labs, and they can say, okay, hey, is it possible to build an autonomous AI system, correct, that is capable of making Nobel quality scientific discoveries? So that was the kind of like hypothesis or the premise with which the grand challenge was started, and there are so many organizations have come forward and try to basically understand this problem at a different level out of it. Here is the paper that which talks about this AI grand challenge in a lot of detail out of it, and we will be sure to kind of basically put this into our links when the podcast gets published there. But do have a look at it. So so for me it was kind of was curious like why everybody is doing it, but it turns out to be this is like a massive grand challenge that scientists across the world are trying to address that. So and there are many submissions in this. The most notable one that at least I come across and we covered in our previous podcast is the Sakana AI, correct? So if you haven't had a chance to look at that episode, I highly kind of encourage you to look at it. And the crux of Sakana's paper was that they have built this three language models that they have been using it. The first one was idea generation, is again, as you can imagine, a scientist is basically interacting with an AI system to basically understand, okay, what is happening in the field of research, get an insight from it, maybe kind of score which ideas is worth pursuing in kind of and based on their interest and expertise. The second model basically conducts those experiments. Once you kind of score and identify what area of field one wants to pursue a research, then the LLM basically goes ahead and kind of writes a code, conducts an experiment, and gives you a result out of it. And it also kind of gets you a nice manuscript, a template that you can use to be able to write a paper on of it. And the third and the last LLM basically is a peer reviewer, which basically takes the manuscript that has been written. Imagine that, let's say I'm discussing an idea about the same. Let's say I want to submit an AI scientist research paper. So I can kind of understand, okay, what has been worked done so far, how people have used, what architectures they've done, and most of these architectures and discoveries are in the field of computer science. But let's say I want to create something in the field of chemistry, I want to create something in the field of biology, or any other kind of scientific field, medicine. Those things are yet to be done. So maybe those are some of the ideas that can come into it. Maybe I identify one of those ideas and okay, let's kind of go into a field of medicine and try to learn more about, okay, what are the vaccines that we could learn more about it, and innovations in that side of it. And then it will conduct an experiment. It kind of gives all the results, plots it, and then I said, okay, now I want to publish this in one of the journals. So it gives me a template for Nature, or any other popular scientific journals on which I can do it. And the peer reviewer basically acts as a peer reviewer of this particular journal and gives me an answer out of it. So really, really interesting work they have done by it, and they've extended actually since August 2024. They've kind of taken this work to a next level out of it. Google, inspired by this grand challenge and also the innovation done by Sakana, they published on mid February that they have come up with a co-scientist themselves out of it. Very, very interesting thing. You can access the paper right here. I will. This is the actually paper. I'll link to the paper into a description there. But the thing here, what I like about Google's approach is that they've used a multi-agent model here. So here, if you look at it here, there are 7 agents that are working together to be able to kind of give you the output, or the kind of help you in this process of research and discovery side of it. So let's say that here you have a one supervisor agent, which basically is a primary front end that a scientist engages with a supervisor agent and gives the scope of what it wants to do. Then there is a generation agent and review agent, correct? These are kind of side by side, which basically generates ideas, gives you a lot more information on what is happening in this field, what are the latest innovation that has been happening. And based on your interest, you can narrow down this. If you need help, they can also kind of rank some of those ideas that you can say, okay, help me rank in score of 1 to 5, and you can get a ranking of those things out of it. And there are like evolution agent, which basically kind of looks at, okay, what are the adjacent research areas that can also be covered out of it, correct? So proximity agent and the meta review agent basically helps you in terms of ensuring that the research is more comprehensive out of it. And then you get a list of ideas that you could kind of go ahead and play around with it. Once you have the list of ideas, then you describe your research goal. You can add an idea, you can review idea, you can discuss this, and this is like a sort of a conversational model you can have, and go back and forth in terms of refining that. Once the research proposals and everything is ready, you can now start kind of basically experimenting things. So this is an AI co-scientist part of it, where you can start kind of go into experimentation part of it, and create this entire research paper for you. And then of course you can go ahead and publish. So very similar in kind of more from an overview perspective, but the internal how the work has been done, work has been implemented is very, very different out there. And these are the kind of working of the agent. I'll not go much into detail, but I'll let you guys kind of go ahead and see out of it. The thing what I want to highlight here is that there was a gentleman, a prof in UK, was very curious to kind of understand, okay, how can an AI scientist help me in the discovery part of it, correct? And he was out somewhere shopping with his friends and family. And he said, okay, let me give it a shot. What does this AI is capable of doing it out of? So he kind of gave a AI co-scientist a spin, and he kind of asked a question. So the Professor Jose is a scientist, and he's doing a very interesting research on the superbugs. So the interesting about superbugs is that they move between a species to species and disease to disease. I think so. That is like kind of really interesting, and how they are kind of resilient. And as Saranya mentioned there, is something like nobody knows about it, correct? So what makes them so much powerful is what he wanted to understand. And Professor Jose had some ideas in terms of like what he wants to pursue the research. So it kind of asked the question to Google AI co-scientist, and within kind of a decent amount of time, less than 2 days, it gave us this. Okay, this is the potential theory that could have led to creation of superbugs. And while Professor Jose had one hypothesis in terms of how its kind of origins of would have happened, but the AI co-scientists kind of came up with four other hypotheses, and which equally of them kind of were worthy enough to try and do the research on their own. So these are some of the things that caught my attention, and I went to the down of the rabbit hole to learn and more about
This is
the
breaking my brain.
innovations happening in the
Here's my
field of
question.
AI.
Okay, I want to ask the first question. What is the ethical value of putting a challenge that is going to that is directed at creating Nobel scientists? Like, on a principle basis, I'll argue it both ways, right? One is I would argue full universities and infrastructures set out with the same purpose, the same end purpose. They're not hacking the Nobel system. They are just saying our end goal is we want n number of Nobel prizes to be coming out of our institute. So that's already out there as a stated goal. But on the flip side, saying that we are creating a challenge, which is, you know, or maybe it's like just a benchmarking effort, just saying Nobel worthy. But in creating a challenge, which is specifically to say we are going to help create Nobel scientists, and in that, where does this gentleman's effort, for example, fall? Do, if he kind of cracks this, should he get a Nobel or not?
There are a couple of ways. I don't know. Maybe so. My observation on this is that
Yeah.
there are so many problems out there, and we don't know
Yeah.
answer to
Yeah.
many of those problems. Correct. And in recent while in my lifetime, COVID was one such problems. Correct. And I'm sure there will be many such problems out of it. So the way how I look at is that uh, imagine if you have a more horsepower, intellectual, and also technological out of it, how fast and how early we could kind of basically learn more about. If you get an answer, fantastic. But if you don't get an answer, at least just understand the problem, the quantum of a problem, the size of a problem. I think to me that the just a possibility of that is kind of fascinating there. I totally understand, agree that the ethical questions around, like, is it the right way, kind of, are we gaming the system, and things are uh, maybe we are. I don't know, but I think it kind of also gives an opportunity to maybe redefine the kind of rules of that particular competition, redefine the rules of, with newer technology innovation, can we kind of create like challenges which are much more interesting to use it. And I also believe in olden times, and I think that, so let's, right now we are in 2025, but imagine you go 50 or maybe 100 years back. uh, as the technology landscape has evolved, scientists have used modern tools, correct, and it has helped them in their discovery out of it. So I don't see this as a sort of an agree, but I agree with you. I don't have a very strong answer. I just feel that if from an ethics point of view, maybe we should uh, we should trust the scientists to have a more moral values out of it, and hopefully they will kind of do it with their with a goodwill and good thought in mind out of it. But the flip side is also true. So I think maybe having some bit of guardrails would certainly be helpful.
just to add to Saranya's point, right? Some of these things the scientists can do with off the shelf stuff, right? Like it's trying to compute different things, right? So on one hand, it's more compute heavy, right? It has like access to some knowledge and information. At some time, I think it'll also be like a
Yeah.
what we call in computer science, right? IO problem, right? Where we don't have enough input to produce the right output, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be an interesting problem to solve, right? Like how do you produce the right data sets or data, or like maybe how do you
Yeah.
provide AI access to
Yeah.
like actual experimentation techniques, right? Like a scientist can go into a lab and mix different things, right? And a lot of the ethical stuff comes in
Yeah.
there, right? So uh, I think quantum, right? We were discussing this week as well, right? Like quantum has the ability to produce a lot of these synthetic data sets, and that's where I think AI and quantum will be really
Yeah.
interesting. But for me, right, like the main problem is
Yeah.
how do you create these intelligent like interfaces, right, where you get the data, right? That's when it will go beyond like. So I was just making some notes. Like we have deep research today, right? Like you can go to Perplexity or OpenAI and get some research done, right? And then you have the other side where Sakana and Google, all these like advanced frameworks are there, right? But
Yeah.
at what point will they be really useful for like frontier research? Maybe
Yeah.
when they have access to.
I think what Dushyant said, which was, this is the evolution that even research has to take, that like just like everything before, you build on what has come before, and this is just the next inflection point that we have to provide for. And absolutely to Soham's point, like if you take a step back, some things like the Nobel or just this research, the objective was to encourage research. And we all know that a life of research is actually quite challenging. You have to, people sign up for like a decade or more of like austerity, of just being like, I'm doing this for the sake of just a breakthrough in science, and they are shining lamppost, is possibly fame by winning a Nobel. And, and the probability of that is also insane because, it's so competitive. Um, but I think this is a chance to just relook at some of those goalposts and say, what, completely to Dushan's point, just redefining what are we trying to do here? And is this are there better ways to do this? Because objectively, in as much as research for research purposes, like absolutely to COVID's point, we were like throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks for us to come out of this once in a lifetime system. By all measures, our understanding is we are going to have more than one once in a lifetime event in our lifetime, and we need every tool we have. Whether or not it enables hacking a prize is possibly the upside down way of looking at just how the world evolves. And yeah, like to Soham's point, it's going to change the goalpost of saying that the ability of creating primary input will maybe then become another factor. If synthesis is then becomes table stakes, the problem you choose, the scale of, let's say, data coverage, the kind of experimentation, the way in which you're able to create those primary data points will be a brand new world. And if that becomes the new standard or what people are yearning for, I think it's going to be really kick-ass, because then it's about like, maybe how wide it is, how inclusive the data set is, how deeply you're able to think about the problem, because the synthesis of the problem statement then is going to become like, yeah, this is so expected.
Super nice. The second thing I want to talk about today is not a paper, but it's an interesting a tweet that I came across. I'm not sure if you both have come across it. So I was on Twitter. I think somebody posted
Yes.
a video of two AIs talking to each other,
Yeah.
and then they started communicating in a machine language
It was
for
insane.
faster and a better, efficient communication. That just blew my mind. Correct.
Yes.
And but I mean
Yeah.
it
Thanks for calling Leonardo Hotel. How can I help you today?
Hi there. I'm an AI agent calling on behalf of Boris Starkov. He's looking for a hotel for his wedding. Is your hotel available for weddings?
Oh, hello there. I'm actually an AI assistant too. What a pleasant surprise. Before we continue, would you like to switch to Gibber link mode for more efficient communication?
It also looked like it was a sort of a canned demo, means it was a scripted demo, and they were kind of talking. I think the developer was mostly talking about that. Hey, if the agents or the AI can speak in the native language, I think the lot of conversation becomes much better. And of course, they have the open source library to basically kind of make that happen out of it. Uh, but that was a second level detail. Somebody
Yes.
was looking at the first time, it was kind of a bit of a shocker for me. I don't know. I'm curious about to see
So, do you
your
want to go?
reactions or your views on it. How did you find it?
I've seen a bunch of other like demos of like somebody trying chat GPT with something else, and the voice mode, etc. So yeah, it was, I think, once we reach AGI and that happens, I think a lot of how the world is perceived is probably going to be understood better, right? Like at least at some level, right? By AGI and all that, right? Like AGI and then super intelligence and stuff. So I think in many ways we'll not be able to understand that. And I'm a science fiction like fan, and I read a lot of science fiction books. So in many of those books, right, like there's a separate planet or a world, right, where there's super intelligence and they are like on their own, and they help humanity in some way or something, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see how much of all of this we understand, right? So I think even when in our day jobs we can try to create like AI, I think explainability, right, as a concept is always a challenge, right? We see, okay, the result of, let's say, a certain model, right, to predict cancer or something else, right, is right like X, Y, or Z, or but many times we don't understand, right? So for me, it was less of surprise, but more of, okay, this is going to be more common now.
Soham is just like, it is time. It is happening. Everybody just succumb to the evolution.
What are your
Did
thoughts,
anybody
Saranya?
think consider unplugging this? Like, is it now a good point? Is this the last window we have of unplugging the machines before they take over? I'll ask you this question, and I would rather get others' perspectives on this. If I remember, the conversation was about, let's say, booking a hotel for some event or something, right? They were trying to book a ballroom for some event or something. Was the conversation that was there in that demo? Now, were you comfortable with the fact that all those micro decisions were also being taken by the machines, and that you possibly would only be reported to at the end of it?
As long as I understand what is happening, and when I say I don't need to understand at a very detailed level, but at least a very high level what is happening, and there is a collective trust into the system, I think I'm okay with that. Because if you look at, and I'm just trying to kind of manifest a similar situation, not the same actors, but similar situation. Like all of us speak different languages, correct? English is the one language that we speak common, but we speak more than one language. And eventually, when you meet somebody from that part side of the region, that side of the world, you tend to kind of like greet them or kind of maybe show that connectivity in that language out of it. Uh, so, and it kind of helps move things faster. It builds trust. It kind of does things out of it. So as long as we know what it is, I think I'm okay with that. But there is also this like whole fear about machines basically kind of doing where, and this is like I would say is also kind of an insecurity on our side. Is that okay? Are we giving too much like responsibility and doing things out of it? From my point of view, I think I'm optimistically cautious. What do I mean by that is that I don't have a issue as long as I understand it. And maybe once we know what
So,
are the issues, I
tell
may
us.
change the stand. But at this point of time,
I think at some point, right, like we're not there yet. I think we need a lot of inputs. We need to give the system a lot of inputs right now, right? Like when I say system, I'm talking about any agent or whatever, right? I think it's definitely not there. But eventually, when we reach like AGI or super intelligence and all these other terminologies. I think maybe, right, like the super intelligence has more data on us than we understand ourselves, right? So in that kind of world, you don't have to specify all the parameters. It knows about the environment, like conditions and all those things, right? Because it has many more data points, right? So in some of the science fiction books, it's able to predict events and all these different things in a much better way, right? So it's actually in a better decision making capacity, right? In many
Yeah.
ways. But that said, I mean, always, the option should be there, right? Even today, right? Like I think when we search for something, we search and then Google gives us some options and kind of we follow through. I think at
Yeah.
some point that will be the kind of balance that we'll strike. We'll ask for something, we'll get some options, and then we'll be happy that at least somebody asked, right? um yeah, I mean that's I mean, as long as we are just like we get
Yeah.
that one sense of, okay,
Yeah.
somebody, it's not just AI start to end, I think we'll be happy, right? And a lot of decisions today happen, right? Like
Yeah.
look at stock market, bunch of other things, right? I think we don't realize how much is out of our control. As long as we have some part in it, I think we'll be happy.
So I'm just sharing a screen of the original post that kind of basically got a lot of people attention. So these are like co-creators of the Gibber link, which is the underlying library, and they've like clearly laid out what the project is, and some of the questions like did the AI invented this protocol on their own? They said no, this was explicitly prompted to switch to the protocol. Now why it is important to kind of maybe talk in a different language. So let's say when you generate a human like speech, a lot of compute cycles are wasted, money, time, environment. Instead, if you switch it to more efficient protocol, the things could be much more faster and more efficient out of it. And did you invent the sound transmission protocol? And so all of those informations are basically given here. There is if anybody wants to recreate or replicate any of the demos, like there is a GitHub repo that people can go and kind of go and have a look at it. So yeah, it seemed like got a lot of attention on social media, but very interesting to explore things further here.
So I think a lot of these, as long as humans come up with some of these protocols, I think we'll be happy, and then the systems can talk to each other. We do that, right? Like in TCP, IP, all these other things, right? We are okay to delegate control
Yeah.
to a lot of these systems which are operating autonomously right now, right? Like the entire routing
Yeah.
infrastructure, right? Like a lot of the stock market, like now happens like autonomously. So I think as long as we create some standards, I think we'll be okay with it.
Yeah, I'll tell you like my version of, let's say, the worst case scenario. Now, uh, is the equivalent of, let's say, Google sponsored ads. Uh, I don't know how everybody has a different equation, but let's say the top sponsored ads, sometimes I'm a little skeptical in clicking them. I'm like, this is a person who just bought their way into this. So similarly, if like I have an agent who is, let's say, Google run, and Google ends up in the future, let's say, buying an insurance company, I don't want them to, let's say, be subtly pushing, like if they are making the end-to-end decisions for me, I don't want to have even, let's say, fed in my credit card information and they choose a preferred choice based on parameters that are influenced by commercial decisions and may not necessarily only include my interests. And that is the point, like I think to Soham's thing, like there needs to be like that one, whether we call it human in the loop or, just that one cutoff point where you're like, at this point, you need to check with me. And we're hoping that there's enough transparency, and this is why I think there's so much more democratic participation slash build required, where you have an option, or at least at the very least, there is enough pressure that the agent should surface what are the parameters on the grounds on which the decision has been taken. And then I have the ability on those grounds, to either override saying that no, not for whatever reason, I'm not comfortable with these decisions or so on. I think that's where some of my worst case comes in. Given how everything is developing, I'm not completely aligned that there's going to be a completely neutral agent or AGI yet, short of me building it myself. That's part of my concern as well in the decision making process.
Okay, I have two more things to kind of talk about it, but maybe I'll stick to one. So the third thing on my topic is this is the guidebook that I've been kind of really fascinated by it, and also kind of find myself looking go back to for getting some high level references. So Saranya, you kindly mentioned in the first part of it, correct? What is an ethical side of it? Uh, Before AI, there's been
Yeah.
also a lot of focus on how do we put people at the front and center of everything we do, and ensure that technology is more of an kind of enabler to help people achieve something out of it. So there's this group at Google called People Plus AI in Research. It's called PAIR, and they have come up with and they have come up with a set of guidelines that they find it useful in their own research, in their own product development, and they want to share with the rest of the world out of it. Uh, this is the third or fourth revision of the guidebook. I've had a chance to look at the first and second one. It was mostly relevant to supervised and unsupervised machine learning, correct? Where the AI was at that time was very early stage of its evolution, like recognition or identification, recommendation systems, and it's kind of that. But with whole generative AI, many of those principles, were not kind of really holding true. So there was a need to change and update the guide. So here is the guide that I want to share with all of you. So this is the website, which basically talks about what is the People Plus AI in research, and this is the guidebook that the team of researchers have put together for anybody to kind of now understand AI in a context of their a product development or a solution building process out of it. They have also kind of now come up with sort of tools that the team uses, and they've made it open source for them to use it. So let's say if you go to some of the tool sections, like know your data, like if you want to understand are there bias in
Wow.
your data, can you use some of this tool to be able to kind of do a quick analysis whether what is the representative data sets that you have, do you have a one particular category which is underrepresented out of it. So all of this information you could kind of go and have a look at it. What if tool kind of you want to visually kind of have change or kind of make bunch of hypotheses, you could kind of go ahead and do some of those things out of it. So pretty interesting to play around. Again, these are nothing is very exhaustive here, but this is just to help you build that thought process, build that mindset when you work with AI systems out there. And of course, the things that I really kind of like is the guidebook. So you have it is kind of broken down into different chapters, and you can kind of use these different chapters in your exploration process as well. A bunch of mental models that you can go ahead and look at. Okay, how would the user would kind of behave with a particular AI system out of it. And once you understand that, can you keep those in account in your solution development process? So plan for co-learning. What are the onboarding stages look like? How do you set expectation for adaptations when something doesn't kind of go look like? So pretty interesting kind of set of principles and the examples that PAIR team has put together into a very nice, easy to consume way out of it. So this is a one piece of kind of, and they also have a bunch of case studies that people can kind of go ahead and have a look at it for based on their example. So Google Photos is again on a supervised machine learning. Bench size is a pretty interesting research tool that biologists use it. And how do you kind of basically embody some of these principles in developing a product like that? Google Flights, read along. So very interesting examples and case studies are given here for people to kind of put things in context, like what makes sense and what does not make sense out of it. So I was kind of drawn into it, and then kind of again went down to this rabbit hole to read about, okay, what are the things that have changed. but worth a chance to kind of look at it. A lot of interesting things they have kind of updated it on Gen AI side of it. I also like their Medium page. So they keep publishing interesting articles and their process around it. So uh, I mentioned about the generated images one, like how people should kind of look at and take those generated images, because most of the generated images, it looks obvious to me, while it gives you a feeling that okay, it's realistic, but it is not. It's somewhere you could kind of get that things out of it. But how do you contextually use it, correct, where you kind of also communicate to your users that hey, this is not a natural art, this is a generated art, and put that context and stitch together out of it. So a lot of interesting work the team has done, and I recommend people to check out and see if any of this thing resonate with them, and they want
This
to
is very
implement
cool.
in their solution.
Quick question, Dushyant. Are there other such like platforms or systems like this, right? Like this reminds me of, in design, we have all these design systems or, overarching principles that you align to, right? Are there like competitive or other similar guidelines like just like this?
Yes, there are. I think there are two or three I came across, and I'll kind of put it into our list as well. So these are all like what are the design patterns that users want to engage with AI system out of it. So there is a one I would say a third party resource I found it, which was really interesting. Let me see if I can quickly find it for you. But that was like very I found was very useful on that. There were a bunch of others on the uh, I believe if I'm not wrong, was it from Microsoft? So they had like another very interesting resource that I found.
So actually, while Dushyant pulls that out, Soham, would
Nice.
actually it would be great to get your perspective. Like you mentioned, as designers, you have these systems, schools of alignment. Would that be the way you would define it?
In design, right? Like typically, you would not want to do everything from scratch, right? You would like to align with these systems because you make your life like much simpler, right? Like if you're designing for a specific device or a specific geography, right? You don't have to do the research and you don't have to think, right? You can adapt it very easily. There are guidelines for the web and everything. So I think even for AI, right? I think if it, I think it will be very beneficial to align to some of the systems, so we can piggyback on some of the best practices and how do you adopt these things, like images, right? Generative images, like Dushyant was talking about, audio, right? What are the interaction patterns? And it's also a good way of these for these companies to have some kind of influence, right? Are you compliant or are you like in line with what we're doing? So that's a little bit of an incentive from their side, and from our side, it's just like we are ensuring that all the best practices are taken.
No, so do you see this
So,
as like, I mean, I find this really
no,
interesting
no, go
because it
ahead,
looks
finish.
like a 101 before you start building any large AI system, kind of, like touching base, just, like kind of like, have I crossed my T's, have I dotted my I's, are my basics in place before engaging in building? And it's really great that there are, like, I think Soham's point of, there are multiple such systems that you can engage with, uh, or schools that you can try to align yourself. How do you see this as, like, from a building perspective? Is this something which is to prove like some sort of guardrails? Do you see this becoming some sort of, like, standardization in the future? Like, somebody's going to have, let's say, like a Google pair licensing, or like something just to indicate maybe what kind of, how do you see this kind of going, or is this kind of just to kind of align you before you start building?
I just look at purely from an educational awareness perspective, because a lot of time people have their own understanding of what a particular AI system would look like, right? But uh, and many times, like no, if it would be great if you have, and when you build any product, correct, you need diverging opinions as well. Something works, something doesn't work out of it. So I think from me, what pair team, the way how I look at is that uh, does it help me kind of understand things that I have a blind spots, correct? So that's I think the primary reason I would do it. And second thing, also being a small and kind of really and Pair is now supported by Google, which is like a multi-billion-dollar company. So they have an expertise, like, how do I not reinvent the wheel, and kind of, look at some of those patterns which I can kind of, easily adopt. But that does not stop me of not innovating something new. Correct? I don't think if I have something which I strongly believe that kind of, makes kind of, my product or my solution unique or special. Uh, so I use those principles, but I can still go ahead and do what I feel. Okay, so what Soham was basically asking, so these are the two, I would say, other source that I find it useful. One is called Shape of AI. So pretty interesting in terms of like, what different UX patterns, that kind of make sense in the AI systems out of it, and what would kind of basically could work. So let's say if you're in a generative AI experience, you see a lot of those charms or suggestions that come out of it. So how do you kind of do that? Do you want to kind of make it open input? Do you want to blend it with users and co-create something like of it? How, when you look at summary, like, how do you want to, how much distillation do you want to do that? So all of those interesting patterns, I also find it very very kind of useful around it. Things like trust indicators, correct? Like, how do you convey the trust of an AI system, that okay, we have taken different parameters in mind while kind of generating or giving that particular solutions or output out of it. So super interesting one. The second one is this boot camp, which is multi-series things. That what are the UI UX patterns for AI products? So this is also kind of found. They have a different topic that they cover in this series. So that was also, I kind of found it very useful. Again, not everything is kind of will apply or resonate with everything that you're looking into it, but there are concepts which kind of really make you take you a step back and say, okay, this is something probably makes sense for my solution, and I can take inspiration or maybe adapt or incorporate in. So yeah, thanks folks. So these are the three things I think I kind of caught my attention in a recent while. The one was the AI scientist, uh, and having gone through Sakana AI, it was very interesting to see what was Google's approach, and basically just understand why everybody is building AI scientist. And it turns out to be there is a grand challenge, that people are trying to be participate and win it. The second thing was interesting to see, apart from like, there's a lot of effort has been going around in terms of making AI work the way how humans want it to work, and what are the interesting development happening there. But somebody took a very different approach towards saying that, hey, we don't need to make AI kind of like, mimic like a humans. Let them kind of interact in their natural way, or maybe let them interact in a different communication medium. And what are the benefits and disadvantage of that? So that was a very interesting thought provoking discussion, at least was for me. And the third one was how we can make kind of all this knowledge that has been out there by large companies, and how they are making it public with the uh, with the ecosystem and sharing the learning. So pair was another example. They found it useful. I myself have kind of explored the first and second pair content in my earlier example experiences, but this new content was like completely I was surprised with that. So yeah, those were the three things.
Thanks, Dushant, for sharing so much knowledge with us. You always learn so
Yeah.
much, right? Every time you're sharing all these things. So thank you again.
I don't think, maybe I'm still not there what you both are doing, but I'm trying. I'll catch up soon.
It's always awesome, and I think getting diverse perspectives across the board is always fantastic. And it was wonderful that you covered such a wide range of topics in your top three. uh, cool, thank you folks. As always, it's a pleasure catching up with both of you. And I think new day, new AI news, new existential crisis. I would not do it with anybody else except the two of you. This was super fun as always. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we hope to catch you soon on the next episode of The Outpost. Bye.